Hello and welcome to a new Having a Book Moment with Jon Longhi. This is an extra special edition because we have Mr. Robert Crumb in the house, and he's going to answer a couple of questions for us today. The first one is there's a story I've been wanting to preserve for posterity for years, which was you told me this great story about how back in the 60s you had a drug experience that led to this period of like brain damage, and that's when you came up with all your early characters. So I was wondering if you could kind of tell us that story. I've always thought that was really fascinating about creativity and madness and stuff like that.
I'm not sure I ever fully recovered from that. It had a permanent effect on me. Well, it was 1960, late 65 in New York, and I was taking a lot of LSD at that time. There was this guy, Buzzy Linhart, that I knew. He was a musician, and he gave me this drug, and he said, and then he called me about a day later and said, "Did you take that stuff that I gave you?" I said, "No." He said, "Don't take it. There's something wrong with it." He said, "Somebody took it and it was not right." And I took it anyway. I was young and foolish, and it started off like regular LSD, and then everything went fuzzy all of a sudden. And then I was in this fuzzy state for several months until the next time I took LSD, and then the next time I took the LSD, it just cleared away this strange, vague fuzziness. It was like the old days of TV when the screen would just be fuzzy. It was like that.
Yeah.
And in that time, I couldn't think clearly, and I was very helpless. I had other people take care of me. And if I sat still and let my mind wander, it just went into this very strange place. It's really hard to describe. It was very electric, and there's all these like crazy, like 1940s cartoon images dancing in my head. And that kind of got me fascinated by that old kind of grade B style of cartooning, that funny animal style, that it's kind of like sub-Disney style of cartooning, because that's what it all looked like in my head. It's like dancing electric images. It's very strange. And then I was always drawing in my sketchbooks, and since my rational mind was completely dysfunctional, or not completely, but almost, then it allowed all this stuff to pour out that I didn't worry about whether it made sense or not. It just poured out. Unfortunately, I was drawing all the time, so I had a record of it. And that, all those characters like Mr. Natural and the old Pooparoo and the stuff like that all came out of that period. It was late 65 through about March or April 66 when I took that LSD that cleared it all away. It was very strange.
Didn't you say like you'd be on the bus and you'd be like seeing these creatures on the bus or something like that?
I'd be riding the bus and my brain would just start to wander, and then with all this cartoon stuff would be in my head. These long bus rides in Chicago. I didn't have a car, so I'd get around by bus. I was staying with my friend Marty Pauls in Chicago. I remember he said there's this store that says thousands of old comic books with the titles torn off, remaindered comics, and we went there, and I was attracted to these really third-rate funny animal comics like Wacky Duck and stuff like that were very violent and not very well drawn, but somehow they clicked with that sensibility that I was in at that time. Very strange, very inspirational period.
That might be a good time for me to ask the next question. You got a famous piece of artwork where Binky Brown asks Mr. Natural, "What's it all mean?" and he answers, "It don't mean shit." But you've always been kind of a questing soul. You did the Book of Genesis and stuff.
I'm on a spiritual quest, as much as the next fellow.
Do you still feel that way? I mean, at this point, what do you think is the meaning of life at this point?
I still question what's the meaning of life, and my wife, who's a much more worldly wise person than I am, thinks it's very like sophomoric to always go around asking what's the meaning of life. But it occurred to me about a week ago, I had the Zen moment. That's the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking what the meaning of life is. Duh!
What is the right question?
The right question is how to survive. That's the right question. Not what's the meaning of it. That's ridiculous. It's sophomoric. Alien was right. Duh.
Do you think you can change your personality, though, that you stop looking? Do you think it might work against kind of a naturally analytic part of your personality or something like that?
Well, I think it can evolve, you know, a little bit, increment at a time. I don't know. I don't think there's any easy street to, you know, wisdom or enlightenment or anything. I think it's just a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. That's the best you can hope for if you're not too screwed up from drugs and alcohol and just the ravages of life. I don't know.
What, speaking of kind of inspiration stuff, what are your favorite books? I mean, if you had to pick like some books that really inspired you, what would they be?
The Cotton Kingdom by Frederick Law Olmsted comes to mind. He went through the South in the 1850s and wrote a detailed account of what he was seeing, what he was observing there. It's a really interesting book.
What about artists? You had to pick your favorite artist? Who is it?
Bukowski. Some favorite sayings of Bukowski. As I bend down to tie my shoes in the morning, the first thing that comes to my mind is, Christ almighty, what next?
That's a good one.
Yeah, Bukowski. But Bukowski also said, you see, I got this problem with the human face.